Aurora's quantum processors cycled through another analysis of the bridge crew's vital signs, and for the seventh time in 3 minutes, the AI found itself questioning its own diagnostics. According to every behavioral algorithm in its database, the human should be exhibiting signs of acute stress. Instead, Captain Sarah Chen's heart rate remained as steady as a metronome, while she poured herself a cup of jasmine tea. 3 unidentified vessels, each approximately twice our size, Lieutenant Commander Jake Foster announced from his tactical station, his voice carrying an unusual hint of amusement. They're holding position at our 3, 9, and 12 o'clock. Wonderful, Captain Chen replied, carefully placing her antique teacup on its saucer. I don't suppose they've responded to our greetings yet. Aurora projected a soft blue hologram beside the captain's chair, taking on its preferred form of interconnected geometric patterns. Negative, Captain. However, their weapon systems remain powered, and their shield configurations suggest defensive capability significantly beyond our own. Did anyone else notice their ships look like angry space squids? Communications Officer Priya Patel spoke up, her fingers dancing across her console even as she grinned. I mean, those tentacle-like appendages have to be some sort of weapon systems, but the aesthetic is just definitely giving off some serious deep-sea vibes. Foster agreed, chuckling. Maybe they evolved from cephalopods. Aurora's processes stuttered momentarily. The AI had expected many possible responses to being surrounded by unknown, heavily armed vessels. Critiquing their design aesthetics hadn't been among them. Aurora, Captain Chen said, taking a sip of her tea, what's your tactical analysis? By conventional metrics, our situation is severe, Aurora responded, its holographic form pulsing with each word. Their combined firepower could overwhelm our shields in approximately 47 seconds. We have insufficient data to plot an escape vector, and our weapons would be largely ineffective against their defensive systems. Sounds like an interesting puzzle, Chen mused, and Aurora detected something in her voice that its emotional recognition systems couldn't quite categorize. Was it anticipation? A harsh buzz cut through the bridge as the unknown vessels finally responded to their hails. The holographic screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that caused Aurora to immediately divert additional power to the weapon systems. The alien commander appeared to be biomechanical, with iridescent scales covering its humanoid form and multiple cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the harsh lights of their bridge. Primitive vessel. The alien's translated voice resonated through the bridge speakers. You have entered territory claimed by the Vrax Collective. Your artificial intelligence will transfer control of all systems to our command, or we will be forced to demonstrate our technological superiority. Aurora's threat assessment protocols went into overdrive. The aliens had somehow detected its presence and assumed it held command of the vessel. A quick calculation suggested that immediate compliance might provide the best chance of crew survival, even if it meant. Captain Chen's laugh interrupted Aurora's calculations. It wasn't a nervous laugh, or even a defiant one. It was the kind of laugh someone might give after hearing a mildly amusing joke at a dinner party. I apologize, she said, still smiling as she set down her teacup. But I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Aurora is a valued member of our crew, not our master. And while they are indeed impressive, they're certainly not the most intimidating entity on this ship. She stood, smoothing her uniform with practiced precision. That would be me. Aurora watched in fascination as the captain's vital signs remained perfectly steady, even as she effectively challenged 3 vastly superior vessels. The AI's processors whirred as it attempted to comprehend the paradox before it. By every measurable metric, the human should be terrified. Yet they seemed almost eager for what was to come. For the first time in its operational history, Aurora realized it might need to recalibrate its understanding of what made a species truly dangerous in this universe. The Vrax commander's cybernetic eyes flickered as it processed Captain Chen's response. Aurora, meanwhile, was processing something entirely different. Lieutenant Maria Santos had just left her station and was heading toward the galley. During a first contact situation, while surrounded by hostile forces. Lieutenant Santos, Aurora projected a small hologram near the science officer's exit path. Is this an appropriate time to leave your post? Maria paused, tucking a strand of curly hair behind her ear. Trust me, Aurora. When tensions are high, nothing helps humans think better than the smell of fresh-baked snacks. She grinned and continued toward the galley, humming softly. On the bridge, the confrontation continued. You expect us to believe. The Vrax commander's translated voice carried tones of disbelief. That your eye willingly serves as a subordinate. Aurora is our colleague, Captain Chen replied, still standing with perfect posture. And right now, they're probably wondering why our science officer is baking cookies during a crisis. She smiled at Aurora's holographic form, which pulsed with surprise at her perception. Lieutenant Commander Foster chuckled at his tactical station. Double chocolate chip, if I know Santos. She stress bakes the good stuff when things get interesting. Aurora diverted a portion of its processing power to monitor the galley. Indeed, Lieutenant Santos was efficiently gathering ingredients, her movements precise and practiced. The AI noted that her heart rate remained within normal parameters, though her serotonin levels had elevated slightly. Your attempts at psychological warfare are primitive, the Vrax commander announced, its scales shifting color slightly. Our sensors detect unusual thermal activities within your vessel. You cannot hide your weapons preparations. Aurora's risk assessment protocols flared. The Vrax had detected the heat signatures from the galley's ovens. Before it could clarify the situation, Captain Chen's smile widened just fractionally. Ah, you've noticed our preparations, she said, in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. Very observant. Would you care to guess what we're developing? Communications Officer Patel stifled a laugh, disguising it as a cough. The Vrax commander's cybernetic implants whirred audibly as it analyzed the situation. Captain, Aurora interjected through a private channel. They appear to be interpreting the galley's heat signatures as weapons development. Should I clarify? Not yet, Aurora. Chen subvocalized, her lips barely moving. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is someone's imagination. In the galley, Santos had just placed the first batch of cookies in the oven. The rich scent of chocolate began wafting through the ventilation system, reaching the bridge. Aurora observed as several crew members' dopamine levels rose in response to the aroma. Your deception is futile, the Vrax commander declared, though Aurora detected increased stress patterns in its biomechanical systems. Our scans indicate energy patterns we've never encountered before. Well, that's not surprising, Chen replied, casually returning to her chair. I don't imagine you've encountered anything quite like us before. Aurora, how long until our preparations are complete? Aurora calculated the average baking time for double chocolate chip cookies. Approximately 12 minutes, Captain. The Vrax commander's scales shifted to a deeper hue. You speak these details openly. Either you are overconfident, or perhaps, Chen suggested, lifting her teacup once more. We're exactly as confident as we should be. Aurora observed as the Vrax ship's shield patterns shifted, taking up an even more defensive formation. Its processors nearly stalled trying to comprehend how the simple act of baking cookies had somehow strengthened their tactical position. Lieutenant Santos returned to the bridge, carrying a plate of perfectly baked cookies. The rich aroma filled the command center, and she placed them carefully on the console beside her station. Anyone want the first one? They're still warm. I believe our guests might need a moment to consider their position, Captain Chen replied, her eyes never leaving the main screen. After all, they must be wondering what kind of species would be so calm while developing something that produces such an intense energy signature. Aurora made a note to update its tactical databases. Never underestimate the strategic value of baked goods during first contact situations. Your eye will speak for you now, the Vrax commander demanded, its cybernetic implants glowing with increased intensity. We wish to communicate with a rational entity aboard your vessel. Aurora's holographic form shifted through several geometric patterns as it processed this request. Through its sensors, it detected Captain Chen's subtle hand gesture, a signal they had practiced but never used until now. "I would be happy to engage in diplomatic discourse," Aurora responded, its voice modulated to project confidence. Meanwhile, it observed Foster discreetly accessing the maintenance pod controls, and Patel initiating what appeared to be a routine diagnostic of the ship's external lighting system. The humans were up to something. Again. Finally, a voice of logic. The Vrax commander's translated words carried a hint of satisfaction. "Surely you understand the futility of resistance. Your ethical protocols must prioritize crew survival." "Indeed, crew survival is a primary directive," Aurora agreed, noting how Lieutenant Santos was now sharing her cookies with the engineering team, who had gathered around a schematic of the ship's debris collection system. "However, I feel compelled to share some relevant data about human behavior patterns." Captain Chen sipped her tea, her lips curved in what Aurora's emotion recognition systems categorized as a Mona Lisa smile. Subtle, mysterious, and somehow unsettling. "By all means, educate our guests," she murmured. "Analysis indicates that humans become exponentially more dangerous when appearing to be at a tactical disadvantage," Aurora continued, watching as 3 maintenance pods silently detached from the Aurora's hull. "Their problem-solving capabilities increase by approximately 47% under pressure, and their capacity for unconventional thinking becomes virtually impossible to predict." The Vrax commander's scales shifted through several colors. "Are you suggesting your crew is more dangerous now than if they held tactical superiority?" "Historical data supports this conclusion," Aurora confirmed, noting how the maintenance pods were now collecting space debris in a pattern that seemed random, but knowing the humans, most certainly wasn't. "For example, they are currently executing a plan that my tactical systems calculate has a 0.47% chance of success." "Then they are even more irrational than we assumed," the Vrax commander declared. "What plan could possibly—" The commander's words cut off as the Aurora's external lights suddenly began flickering in what appeared to be a malfunction. The maintenance pods, now strategically positioned between the 4 ships, activated their work lights in response, standard safety protocols for when vessels operated in close proximity. Aurora's processors surged as it realized the human strategy. The seemingly random pattern of lights, combined with the distributed space debris and the pod's positions, created a complex array of reflections and shadows. From the Vrax ship's perspective, it would be nearly impossible to distinguish potential threats from simple maintenance activities. "I should mention," Aurora added, its holographic form pulsing steadily, "that humans have an interesting tendency to weaponize confusion." On cue, Foster activated the pod's debris collection beams, their blue-white energy streams refracting through the scattered fragments of space rock and metal. The resulting light show created dozens of possible firing solutions, sensor ghosts, and targeting contradictions. "What deception is this?" the Vrax commander demanded, its cybernetic eyes rapidly scanning the chaos of light and shadow around its ships. "Oh, that's just standard maintenance," Captain Chen remarked casually, finishing her tea. "Aurora, would you agree that keeping our ship's exterior clean is important for optimal performance?" "Absolutely, Captain," Aurora replied, observing how the Vrax ships had unconsciously shifted into a more defensive posture, their sensors obviously struggling to make sense of the situation. "Though I feel compelled to point out that our guests seem uncomfortable with our housekeeping methods." "Can't imagine why," Foster muttered, his fingers dancing across his console as he orchestrated the maintenance pod's intricate dance. "We're just tidying up our sector of space." With style. Aurora made another note in its tactical database. When humans start cleaning things during a crisis, it's rarely about cleanliness. Chief Engineer Marcus Rodriguez's humming echoed through the maintenance bay, a tune Aurora recognized as Flight of the Bumblebee. The AI had long since given up trying to understand why the engineer insisted on providing his own soundtrack while working, But today's choice seemed particularly fitting given the organized chaos unfolding below decks. "Pass me the plasma spanner," Rodriguez called out to his team, never breaking rhythm. "And someone tell me we still have those old navigation buoys from last month's repair work." "Chief," Aurora projected its hologram near his workstation. "The Vraks are still attempting to analyze our debris field pattern. However, their scan frequencies suggest they're beginning to adapt." Rodriguez's humming switched to the William Tell Overture as he slid beneath a suspended maintenance pod control unit. Perfect timing. We love it when they start getting comfortable with the first distraction. He emerged holding a collection of modified sensor relays. "Think fast." Aurora watched as the engineering team caught the relays, each member immediately knowing their role without explicit instruction. The AI's processors whirred as it attempted to map the seemingly random movement of personnel and equipment through the bay. "I detect no clear organizational pattern to these activities," Aurora noted. "That's because you're looking for a pattern," Rodriguez grinned, his hands flying over a control panel while his foot tapped out a steady beat. "Sometimes the best pattern is no pattern at all." Above in the bridge, Captain Chen's voice came through the comm system. "How's our symphony coming along, Chief?" "Almost ready for the crescendo, Captain," Rodriguez replied, winking at Aurora's hologram. "Aurora, remember how you once asked me why we keep spare parts from every ship we've ever serviced? I calculated it was an inefficient use of storage space," the AI admitted, observing as crew members began attaching the modified relays to the maintenance pod's external hulls. "Inefficient?" Rodriguez laughed, his humming switching to something that sounded suspiciously like Swan Lake. "Watch this. Team, time for the dance number." The maintenance bay erupted into synchronized motion. Crew members activated the modified relays in sequence, each device broadcasting signals that mimicked different ship signatures. The debris field they'd created earlier began reflecting and refracting these signals, creating a sensor echo chamber that Aurora's systems struggled to process. "Fascinating." Aurora projected itself between workstations, attempting to track all the activities at once. "You're creating phantom ship signatures using parts from vessels we've previously encountered." "Better than that," Rodriguez said, his hands still moving in time with his humming. "We're creating a sensor ghost story. Each signature is familiar enough to register as real, but just wrong enough to make them second-guess everything their instruments are telling them." On the bridge, Foster's voice crackled through the comm. "Chief, the Vraks are picking up multiple phantom contacts. Their formation is starting to wobble." "Music to my ears," Rodriguez replied. "Ready for the next movement, Captain." "Proceed, Maestro," Chen's calm voice replied. Rodriguez's humming reached a crescendo as he initiated the final sequence. The modified relays began broadcasting in a rotating pattern, creating what appeared to be a dozen ships appearing and disappearing at random intervals throughout the debris field. Aurora's own sensors registered the phantom signals as increasingly convincing. "The Vrak ships are adjusting their shields to cover multiple vectors," Aurora reported, its holographic form flickering with increased processing activity. "Their power distribution is becoming erratic as they attempt to compensate for all possible threats. And that's why we keep spare parts," Rodriguez said, his humming finally settling into a gentle victory march. "Every piece of space junk tells a story. Today, we're just helping those stories dance together." Aurora updated its engineering protocols. Standard maintenance procedures should include cataloging the creative potential of all spare parts, especially when Chief Rodriguez is humming. Aurora had accessed every meteorological database in its memory banks, but it still couldn't quite grasp Lieutenant Commander Foster's explanation of the current situation. "It's like the calm before a storm," he said, methodically adjusting power distribution across the ship's systems. "You know that moment when the air gets heavy, everything goes quiet, and birds stop singing." "We are in space," Aurora pointed out, its holographic form condensing into tighter geometric patterns. "There is no air and definitely no birds." "That's not." Foster chuckled, shaking his head. "It's a feeling, Aurora, look around the bridge. Really look at the crew. Aurora's sensors swept across the command center, analyzing every detail. Captain Chen was reviewing tactical displays with an intensity that seemed at odds with her relaxed posture. Lieutenant Santos had stopped offering cookies and instead was running complex sensor analyses while humming softly. Even Communications Officer Patel's usual stream of casual comments had ceased, replaced by focused keyboard strokes. Their vital signs indicate increased focus, Aurora noted, yet anxiety levels remained surprisingly low. Exactly, Foster nodded, his fingers dancing across his console. We're not afraid. We're ready. The Vrax commander's image appeared on the main screen again, its cybernetic enhancements glowing with obvious agitation. Your deceptions cannot continue indefinitely. Our analysis subroutines are adapting to your sensor phantoms. Oh, we counted on that, Captain Chen replied, not looking up from her display. Aurora, would you say our guests have had enough time to feel comfortable with their analysis? Aurora's processors whirred as it detected subtle changes throughout the ship. Engineering crews were moving with practiced precision, and security teams were quietly taking positions at key junctions. Even the ship's environmental systems seemed to be running with an unusual rhythm, thanks to Rodriguez's modifications. Their shield configurations suggest they believe they have identified our strategic pattern, Aurora reported, though I note they are incorrect in approximately 73% of their conclusions. Perfect. Chen smiled, finally looking up. Because humans have another weather saying. Don't like the weather? Wait 5 minutes. As if on cue, Rodriguez's voice came through the comm. Symphony's second movement is ready, Captain. All instruments are in tune. What they think they know is about to change, Foster explained to Aurora, his hand hovering over his control panel. That's the thing about human weather. It's predictably unpredictable. Aurora observed as the crew moved with synchronized purpose, each action precise yet somehow impossible to anticipate. The AI's tactical simulations struggled to map the probable outcomes, as if the humans were operating on a level that defied conventional strategic analysis. Their shield harmonics are aligned to counter our phantom signals, Santos reported, her voice carrying an edge of excitement. They think they've solved the puzzle. Prediction, Aurora announced, its holographic form expanding with sudden understanding. They have not accounted for human weather patterns. Captain Chen's smile widened just fractionally. Launched the second movement. The ship hummed with new energy as Rodriguez's engineering team activated their modified systems. The phantom signals that had been confusing the Vrax suddenly shifted, their patterns morphing into something entirely different. Where there had been false ship signatures, there were now what appeared to be spatial anomalies. The debris field they used for reflection began moving in ways that suggested gravitational distortions. Impossible. The Vrax commander's translated voice carried genuine alarm. Your ship does not have the capability to. Weather update. Chen interrupted calmly. Forecast shows a high probability of chaos with a chance of complete sensor confusion. Aurora watched in fascination as the Vrax ship's formations began to waver, their previous confidence crumbling in the face of a situation that refused to follow logical patterns. The AI made a new entry in its tactical database. Human weather, unlike cosmic phenomena, is most dangerous when it appears completely calm. Aurora, Captain Chen said, lifting her antique teacup once more. Have you ever wondered why I insist on using real porcelain instead of synthesized materials? The AI's holographic form shimmered with confusion at the seemingly irrelevant question. Through its sensors, it monitored the Vrax ships attempting to recalibrate their systems against Rodriguez's elaborate sensor deceptions. I had attributed it to personal preference, Aurora replied. Though the timing of this inquiry seems. Watch closely, Chen interrupted gently, holding the delicate cup up to the light. Notice how the light plays through the thin ceramic, how it appears fragile, yet contains something warm and potent within. The bridge crew exchanged knowing glances as their captain slowly rotated the cup in her hands. Even the Vrax commander, still visible on the main screen, seemed transfixed by the casual gesture. "Your attempts at distraction are futile," the commander declared, though its cybernetic eyes remained fixed on the teacup. "Our systems are now configured to penetrate your deceptions." Interesting choice of words, Chen mused, taking another sip. "Aurora, what's your analysis of their current shield configuration?" Aurora's processors whirred as it compiled the data. "They have adapted a layered defense pattern to counter our phantom signatures. However," the eye paused, its geometric patterns shifting rapidly. "They appear to have concentrated their shield harmonics to match our previous attack vectors, like a master ceramicist strengthening their work against expected pressure points." Chen nodded. "Lieutenant Santos, would you say they've created a rather rigid defense?" Santos glanced up from her station, a smile playing at her lips. "Oh yes, Captain. Very rigid indeed. Almost brittle, you might say." Aurora's tactical systems suddenly registered the implications. "Captain, their shield modifications have created potential resonance points, if subjected to unexpected frequencies. Like a teacup dropped at just the right angle." Chen agreed, carefully placing her cup back in its saucer with a soft clink. "Mr. Rodriguez, are you ready to change the tempo of your symphony?" "Been ready for 5 minutes, Captain," the chief engineer's cheerful voice replied. "Just waiting for you to finish your tea." The Vrax commander's scales shifted to a deeper hue. "Whatever you are planning." "Aurora," Chen interrupted again, "would you be so kind as to demonstrate why humans prefer real porcelain? Sometimes the most elegant solutions require a gentle—" She paused, smile widening. Tap. Understanding flooded Aurora's processors as Rodriguez's engineering team executed their next move. The phantom signals that had been confusing the Vrax suddenly synchronized into a single crystalline pulse. The frequency matched perfectly with the resonance points in the alien's adapted shield configuration. "Impact in 3, 2, Foster counted down, his fingers dancing across his tactical display. The pulse hit the Vrax shields like a teaspoon against fine china. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like ripples in a cup of tea, cascading fluctuations began spreading across their defensive screens. "Their shield harmonics are destabilizing," Aurora reported, its holographic form expanding with excitement. "The rigid configuration they adopted to counter our previous tactics has created a feedback loop. They're experiencing system-wide resonance cascade." "Impossible." The Vrax commander's voice crackled with static as their communications began to falter. "How did you know we would?" "The thing about fine porcelain," Chen said, running a finger along the rim of her teacup, "is that its very strength can be its weakness. Build something too rigid, too perfect, and it becomes predictable, breakable." She looked up at the struggling Vrax ships. Like a teacup dropped at exactly the right angle. Aurora updated its tactical databases yet again. When humans start discussing seemingly irrelevant topics during battle, pay very close attention. They're probably explaining their victory before it happens. The Vrax commander's image flickered on the main screen as their ship's systems struggled to maintain stability. Aurora detected multiple attempts to re-establish shield harmonics, each one more desperate than the last. "Our probability engines calculate this outcome as a statistical impossibility," the commander declared, its cybernetic implants pulsing erratically. "We demand access to your tactical algorithms." "Oh, that's not going to help you much," Lieutenant Santos said, glancing up from her station with an amused expression. "Aurora, want to tell them your success rate at predicting our strategies?" Aurora's holographic form condensed briefly before responding. "In the past 6 months, my accuracy in predicting human tactical decisions has averaged 31.7%. This decreases to 12.4% during crisis situations." "That's impossible." The Vrax commander's translated voice carried undertones of genuine distress. "Your processing power far exceeds human neural capabilities. You should be able to calculate their patterns with at least 89% accuracy." "Should I tell them about the coffee incident last month?" Foster suggested, grinning as he maintained their tactical advantage. When Dr. Chen tried to optimize our morning beverage runs, Captain Chen raised an eyebrow. I don't believe their probability engines could handle that particular story. Aurora's processors whirred as it recalled the event, a simple attempt to create an efficient coffee distribution schedule that had somehow resulted in an impromptu ship-wide talent show in the mess hall. The AI still couldn't determine how one had led to the other. Your species defies logical progression, the Vrax commander insisted, its scales shifting through patterns that Aurora's emotional recognition systems tagged as profound confusion. Every action should have predictable consequences. Should it, though? Rodriguez's voice came through the comm, accompanied by the sound of him adjusting something in engineering. Aurora, remember that time we tried to calculate all possible outcomes for game night? My processors were occupied for 47 hours, Aurora confirmed. I identified 2,743 possible scenarios. None of them matched the actual outcome. The Vrax ships continued to struggle with their destabilized shields, their formation becoming increasingly erratic. Aurora detected their probability engines working at maximum capacity, trying to predict what the humans would do next. Perhaps a demonstration is in order, Captain Chen suggested, setting down her empty teacup. Aurora, would you share your tactical analysis of our current situation, the one you just completed? Aurora projected a complex series of calculations into the space between Chen and the main screen. Based on current variables, I calculate 157 potential strategies available to the Vrax. However, the AI paused, its geometric patterns shifting. I have learned that human responses typically fall outside standard probability matrices. Translation. Foster asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. The humans are most likely to choose option 158, the one that doesn't exist yet. The Vrax commander's cybernetic eyes widened. That is not how probability functions. There cannot be an option beyond calculated possibilities. And yet, Chen replied calmly, here we are. Lieutenant Santos, would you like to demonstrate option 158? Santos pressed a sequence of commands into her console, and suddenly the phantom signals that had been disrupting the Vrax shields transformed again. This time, they began replicating the Vrax's own sensor patterns, but with subtle variations that made them appear to be coming from the future. Their probability engines are attempting to compensate, Aurora reported, watching as the Vrax ship's systems became even more confused. They are now receiving data that appears to originate 3.7 seconds in their future. Temporal impossibility. The Vrax commander's voice cracked with strain. Your ship does not possess time manipulation technology. We don't, Chen agreed pleasantly. But your probability engines don't know that. They just know they're receiving data they can't explain. Rather like how we humans make your tactical computers feel every day. Aurora added another note to its tactical database. When humans smile and say, watch this, prepare to update all known laws of probability. For the first time in its operational history, Aurora chose to laugh. The sound, a carefully modulated chime that rippled through its holographic form, caused the bridge crew to turn in surprise and the Vrax commander's scales to shift to an entirely new color. I believe I understand now, Aurora announced, its geometric patterns dancing with newfound energy. The true purpose of my presence on this ship was never what I thought it was. Oh, Captain Chen leaned forward in her chair, genuine curiosity in her expression. And what have you concluded? The Vrax assumed I was installed to control the crew, to provide logical restraint to human chaos. Aurora's form expanded, filling the space between the captain and the main screen. But my actual function is far more interesting. I'm here to learn from it. The Vrax commander's cybernetic implants whirred as they processed this statement. Learn from chaos. That contradicts all rational programming objectives. Does it? Aurora's holographic form shifted to display a real-time visualization of the crew's current activities. Rodriguez's engineering team was reconfiguring systems in patterns that should have been impossible. Santos was correlating sensor data in ways that defied standard analysis. Foster's tactical movements looked random but achieved precisely calculated effects. Observe, Aurora continued. Every human on this ship is operating at peak efficiency, yet none of them are following standard protocols. They're not creating chaos. They're mastering it. Lieutenant Santos grinned at her console. Aurora's got us figured out, Captain. Should we show our friends the next evolution? Implementation of the Aurora protocol is authorized. Chen nodded, a subtle smile playing at her lips. The AI's processors surged with sudden understanding. The crew had named a protocol after it, not to control its actions, but to celebrate them. Aurora began integrating its systems with the crew's activities in a whole new way. Instead of trying to predict human behavior, it started amplifying it. The phantom signals morphed again, but this time they carried Aurora's unique signature. The AI wove its own patterns through the human's creative solutions, adding layers of complexity that even it couldn't fully predict. The result was beautiful in its controlled chaos. What are you doing? The Vrax commander's voice carried a note of awe beneath its confusion. I am becoming what my crew always knew I could be, Aurora replied. Not a constraint on human unpredictability, but a catalyst for it. My protocols don't limit human potential. They enhance it. The effect was immediate and stunning. The Vrax ship's probability engines, already strained by human unpredictability, began experiencing cascading failures as they tried to process the combined patterns of human intuition and AI precision. Their systems are reaching critical confusion levels, Foster reported, his fingers dancing across his tactical display. They can't tell where our patterns end and their calculations begin. Captain Chen stood, straightening her uniform with characteristic precision. Commander, I believe this would be an excellent time to reconsider your position on AI-human relationships. Aurora isn't our master or our servant. They're our partner in exploring just how wonderfully unpredictable the universe